He messaged, "I think we might need to split up." I caught him completely off guard when I replied, "I agree. Your belongings will be on the front steps in 60 minutes." The next message came almost instantly, frantic and messy. "Wait, hold on, I was joking. I wasn't serious. Call me." I didn't. I'm Rachel Carter, 31 years old, and at that exact moment, I was sitting at my workstation in the corner of my apartment living room, reviewing quarterly financial summaries on my laptop. Numbers had always made sense to me. People, not so much. But Daniel Brooks, my boyfriend of 2 years, had become predictable in one very specific way. Every few weeks, whenever I refused one of his spontaneous demands, he would threaten to end the relationship. At first, it terrified me. Then it confused me. Eventually, it just exhausted me. And tonight, when his text appeared on my screen, something inside me finally clicked into place. The notification banner was still glowing when I opened the message again. Daniel's exact words. "Been thinking about it. Maybe we should end things. This just isn't working anymore." I stared at the sentence for about 30 seconds. No racing heartbeat, no anger, just relief. Because I recognized the tactic immediately. 3 weeks earlier, he had pulled the same stunt because I couldn't take a Thursday off work to attend one of his coworkers' backyard barbecues. Before that, it was because I wouldn't split the cost of a designer watch he had suddenly decided he needed. Before that, he had dramatically changed his relationship status online to single after I told him I wasn't comfortable lending him money for a weekend trip. Every time the pattern was the same. Threaten the relationship. Wait for me to panic. Then watch me scramble to fix it. But tonight I was done playing. So I typed the words that ended the game. "I agree. Your things will be outside in an hour." The typing indicator appeared immediately, disappeared, then came back. Then the flood began. "Wait, what?" "Rachel, this isn't funny." I was kidding. I was just annoyed. "Call me." Then the message that made me laugh out loud. "I was testing you." There it was, the confession. I muted the conversation, set my phone face down on the table, and stood up. If Daniel wanted a result, I was happy to give him one. Just not the one he expected. I grabbed an empty moving box from the closet, left over from when I first moved into the apartment, and headed for the bathroom. Daniel had never technically lived here. His name wasn't on the lease. But over the past 2 years, his presence had spread through the apartment like ivy. First it was a toothbrush, then a spare shirt. Then somehow half the medicine cabinet belonged to him. I opened it and stared at the clutter. Too many hair products. A collection of colognes. Face wash, beard oil, moisturizer. I dumped everything into the box. If Daniel thought he lived here, tonight would correct that misunderstanding. Next stop, the bedroom. The closet door slid open with a quiet metallic scrape. Daniel's clothes took up almost an entire rack. Button-downs he left here for convenience. Gym shorts, 2 jackets, and the ridiculous velvet blazer he had worn to his friend's engagement party. I folded none of it. Straight into the box. On my nightstand sat the small wooden tray where I kept my watch and earrings. Half of it was filled with Daniel's clutter. A tangled phone charger, a pair of sunglasses, and the leather bracelet he insisted had sentimental value but somehow forgot constantly. Into the box. Then I noticed the decorative pillows. 4 of them. Daniel had bought them because he said they made the room look more aesthetic. In reality, they were just an inconvenient nightly ritual. I tossed them into a trash bag with zero regret. The living room was next. This space had once been my sanctuary. Clean, minimal, quiet. Then came Daniel's contributions. A yoga mat he had used exactly once. 3 coffee table books he had clearly never opened. A gray throw blanket that matched the furniture but felt like sandpaper. And the framed photo from his cousin's wedding reception. In it, Daniel looked relaxed and confident. I looked trapped. The frame went into the box. Kitchen last. I opened the cabinet and found Daniel's collection of artisanal tea sachets, something he insisted made him feel grounded. Next to them sat the juicer he had begged me to buy. Used twice, then forgotten. And the air fryer he had sworn would change our lives. It changed nothing except my counter space. 45 minutes later, my living room floor was covered in 6 boxes and 3 trash bags. I sealed the last carton with packing tape and checked my phone. 47 missed calls. 32 messages. 5 voicemails. Daniel was spiraling. I carried everything outside 1 trip at a time and stacked it neatly on the front steps of my building. Then I took a picture. The night air felt cool against my face as I sent the message. "Everything is outside. Please retrieve your belongings within 2 hours, or they will be left for donation pickup." The response came immediately. "You can't do this," I typed back calmly. "I just did." 3 dots appeared again. Then, "I pay rent." That almost made me smile. Daniel had contributed to groceries twice in 6 months. Rent? Not once. A new message appeared. "I'm coming over. We're talking about this." Another followed seconds later. "You're overreacting." It was a joke. A joke! Like the time he joked about burning my vintage concert t-shirts when I attended my sister's birthday dinner instead of his office mixer. Or the time he joked about flirting with his ex online to make me jealous. Yes, comedy gold. 20 minutes later, headlights swung into the parking area outside my building. Daniel's car stopped hard. He jumped out before the engine even died. His eyes were red and swollen, tear tracks still visible on his face. He stormed up the walkway and started pounding on my door. "Rachel, open the door!" I watched the whole thing through the doorbell camera on my phone. His voice got louder. "This is insane!" I answered through the intercom, my tone perfectly calm. "Your belongings are on the steps. Please take them and leave." He froze. For a second, he looked genuinely shocked. "I'm not leaving until we talk." I leaned back against the kitchen counter and folded my arms. "Then I'll call the police for trespassing." Silence. Then Daniel grabbed the nearest box and hurled it against the door. Clothes exploded across the porch. Very mature. He dropped onto the steps and pulled out his phone. A moment later, the speakerphone crackled through the camera microphone. His mother answered. "Honey, what's going on?" Daniel's voice trembled dramatically. "Mom, Rachel is kicking me out over a text." There was a pause. Then his mother asked a very simple question. "What text?" Daniel hesitated. "Well, I said maybe we should break up." Another pause. "I was kidding, though," he added quickly. "I was testing her." The silence that followed was so heavy I could almost feel it through the speaker. Finally, his mother sighed. A long, disappointed exhale. "Daniel," her voice hardened. "You didn't." He tried to laugh. "It was just to see if she'd fight for me." Another pause. Then his mother said the one thing he clearly hadn't expected. "Come home." "But Mom, we'll talk about it here." She hung up. Daniel sat there staring at his phone like it had betrayed him. Through the camera, I allowed myself one small smile. But deep down, I knew something else. Daniel Brooks was not the kind of man who accepted defeat quietly. Tonight was only the beginning. And the real meltdown hadn't even started yet. The first 3 days after the breakup followed a very predictable emotional timeline. Day 1, denial. Day 2, anger. Day 3, negotiation. Daniel managed to hit all 3 stages with impressive efficiency. The morning after the box incident, I woke up to 27 unread messages. I made coffee first. Then I started reading. "Daniel, Rachel, please answer." "Daniel, this got out of hand." "Daniel, we just need to talk." "Daniel, you know I didn't mean it." Then a voicemail. I listened to it while standing at the kitchen counter. His voice sounded tired and strained. "Hey, listen. I think we both overreacted last night. Just call me when you wake up. We'll figure this out." We. That word again. The implication that we were somehow equally responsible for what happened. I deleted the voicemail and went to work. By afternoon, the tone had shifted. Denial had expired. Anger was next. My phone buzzed while I was reviewing a financial model. "Daniel, you seriously threw me out over a joke." Another message followed right away. 2 years, Rachel. Then, "You're acting crazy." I stared at the screen for a moment, then typed one sentence. "You ended the relationship, I agreed." No insults, no drama, just the truth. He didn't respond for several hours. That evening, the social media performance began. I didn't even see the post myself. Marco sent me a screenshot. It was a selfie Daniel had taken in his car. His eyes were red, his expression wrecked. The caption read, "When you give someone 2 years of your life and they throw you away over a misunderstanding." The comments had already exploded. "Men are trash." "You deserve better, King." "She sounds toxic." I sighed and tossed my phone onto the couch. Then Marco texted again. "Marco, hold on." 30 seconds later, another screenshot arrived. His comment was visible under the post. "Marco, didn't you text her saying you wanted to break up?" The post vanished less than 5 minutes later. Apparently, Daniel wasn't enjoying the full version of the story being discussed. Day 2, rage. The messages started again around midnight. At first, they were long paragraphs, then shorter, then erratic. "Daniel, you humiliated me." "Daniel, my mom thinks I'm insane now." "Daniel, you didn't even try to stop me." That last one lingered on my screen. "You didn't even try to stop me." There it was. The expectation. Daniel had never wanted a breakup. He wanted proof that I was afraid to lose him. When that proof didn't come, the script collapsed. And Daniel had no backup plan. Day 3, negotiation. At 2:07 a.m., my phone buzzed again. I was half asleep when I reached for it. "Daniel." "Of course. We need to talk. Something serious happened." I sighed and sat up in bed. Against my better judgment, I responded. "Me, what happened?" 3 dots appeared. Then, "Daniel, Olivia might be pregnant." I blinked. Olivia. His ex-girlfriend. The one who had supposedly reappeared only as friendly catch-up messages months earlier. The room was silent except for the hum of the air conditioner. Finally, I typed back. "Me, interesting." A new message appeared instantly. "Daniel, this isn't funny, Rachel. Me. You've been telling me for months she's just a friend. He didn't answer that. Instead, he wrote, Daniel, she's late. I rubbed my forehead. We hadn't slept together in 3 weeks. Because Daniel had recently accused me of being emotionally distant. So I typed the most practical response possible. Me. Take a test. Pause. Then, me. If she is pregnant, handle it with a lawyer. No response came. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not the next afternoon. 48 hours passed. Then one final message arrived. Daniel, she's not pregnant, I replied with a thumbs up emoji. Nothing else. When the pregnancy scare failed to pull me back in, Daniel moved to the next tactic. Property disputes. The text arrived late that evening. Daniel, you kept some of my stuff. I raised an eyebrow. Me. Such as. 3 minutes passed. Then he wrote, my grandmother's necklace. I stared at the message. Daniel's grandmother had never given him a necklace. I knew that for a fact. She was alive and living in Florida. So I replied calmly. Me. Be specific or stop messaging me. Another pause. Then, Daniel, my tablet charger. I almost laughed. Me. It was in the box you threw at my door. Typing indicator. Stop. Start. Stop again. Finally. Daniel, you owe me money. That one surprised me. Me. For what? No answer. The conversation ended abruptly, which meant Daniel had already moved on to the next idea. The escalation arrived 2 days later. I was sitting at my desk when the receptionist transferred a call. Rachel, there's a medical office calling about urgent test results. I frowned. Put them through. A second later, the line clicked. Hello? Then I heard the voice. Daniel. I closed my eyes slowly. Seriously? There was a brief pause. Then he said, I needed to reach you. You impersonated a medical office. You weren't answering. I leaned back in my chair. Daniel, impersonating medical personnel is illegal. Silence. Then he changed tone, softer now. Manipulative. Rachel, you're really going to throw everything away? I didn't, I said calmly. You did. Another pause. Then his voice hardened. I know your secrets. I blinked. What secrets? The silence stretched. Finally, he said, your search history. I almost laughed. My fantasy football drafts and barbecue tutorials? He hung up. But Daniel Brooks was not finished. Not even close. Because the next time I saw him, he wasn't behind a phone. He was standing inside my gym. By the 4th day after the breakup, I had settled into a different routine. No constant notifications. No passive-aggressive comments about my schedule. No emotional landmines waiting in my living room when I got home. That Friday morning, I arrived at my gym a little before 6, the way I usually did. Early enough that the regular crowd hadn't fully arrived yet. The place smelled faintly of rubber mats and disinfectant. Predictable. Controlled. My kind of environment. I loaded plates onto the bench press bar and settled onto the bench, focusing on my breathing before the first set. 3 reps in, I noticed movement near the front desk. At first, it didn't register. Then the voice did. Daniel. My hands froze mid-lift. For a moment, I just stared at the ceiling above me. Of course he was here, because apparently boundaries meant nothing to him anymore. I finished the set, re-racked the bar, and sat up slowly. Daniel was standing at the front desk talking to the gym attendant, a young guy named Victor, who usually worked mornings. Daniel leaned against the counter like he belonged there, like he hadn't been throwing boxes at my door 4 days earlier. I couldn't hear everything, but I caught the important part. Yeah, I'm Rachel's boyfriend, Daniel said. I think I misplaced my key fob. Victor frowned slightly. I can check the account, he said. That was when I stood up. I walked across the gym floor calmly, wiping my hands with a towel. Victor looked relieved when he saw me. Rachel, he said, this gentleman says he's... My ex-boyfriend, I interrupted. The word landed between us like a dropped weight. Daniel turned toward me with a forced smile. Babe, don't do that, he said. The nickname made my skin crawl. We broke up 4 days ago, I said evenly. He's not authorized on my membership. Victor glanced between us. Daniel laughed awkwardly. She's exaggerating. We just had a fight. No, I said. We broke up. The silence stretched. Victor cleared his throat. Sir, if you're not on the membership, I can't issue a key fob. Daniel's smile tightened. Then he leaned closer to the desk. I've been coming here for months. That part was technically true, but only because I had added him to my membership the year before. He had used it exactly 3 times. Victor hesitated. I decided to simplify the situation. He's been following me, I said. Daniel's head snapped toward me. That's not... I raised an eyebrow. You showed up at my apartment. You called my office, and now you're here pretending you lost your access key. Victor's expression changed immediately. Professional mode. Sir, he said, straightening, I'm going to need you to leave. Daniel blinked. What? You're not authorized on the account, Victor said, and if the member feels uncomfortable, we have to ask you to go. Daniel looked at me like I had betrayed him. You're seriously doing this? I folded my arms. You came to my gym. You ignored me for 4 days. You texted me ending the relationship, I said. Remember? He opened his mouth, closed it again. Victor stepped around the desk. Sir. Daniel glanced around the gym. A few early morning regulars were now watching. His jaw tightened. This is ridiculous, he muttered. Then he grabbed his jacket and headed for the exit. Halfway to the door, he turned back. This isn't over, he said. Victor didn't respond. The door closed behind him with a heavy thud. Victor looked at me. You okay? Yeah, I said. Then I sighed. I might need to remove him from the membership completely. Victor nodded immediately. Already doing it. He typed something into the computer, then looked back up. Flagged. If he tries to come back, staff will know. Thanks. No problem. He paused. Ex-boyfriends are weird sometimes. I laughed quietly. Sometimes, I agreed. Then I went back to the bench press. But the focus I'd had earlier was gone. Because something about Daniel's face before he left had bothered me. Not sadness. Not even anger. Frustration. Like a gambler who had just lost a hand, he thought he was guaranteed to win. That afternoon, I got a call from someone I hadn't expected. Lauren, one of Daniel's friends. I answered after the third ring. Hello? Lauren didn't bother with small talk. You need to take Daniel back. I blinked. I'm sorry? He's staying on my couch and crying nonstop, she said. It's been 3 days. I leaned back in my chair. That sounds like a problem for Daniel. Rachel, she said impatiently, people say things during arguments. He ended the relationship. He didn't mean it. I stared out the window of my office, watching traffic crawl slowly below. So? Lauren sighed loudly. You're being cold. No, I said quietly. I'm being single. Silence. Then she tried a different tactic. He's threatening to do something stupid. Like what? He booked a flight to Olivia's city. I shrugged, even though she couldn't see it. Good for him. I hope they're very happy. You're unbelievable. No, I said again. I'm just done. She hung up. I stared at the phone for a long moment, then set it down. If Daniel wanted to run back to his ex, that was his choice. Maybe that had been the plan all along. Maybe the breakup text had been a performance, a way to force me into begging him to stay. But Daniel had miscalculated something important. I wasn't playing anymore. So when I blocked his number that evening, I genuinely believed the drama was finally over. I was wrong. Because 2 weeks later, Daniel Brooks would start showing up everywhere. And that was when things would stop being annoying and start becoming dangerous. For about 3 days after the gym incident, everything was quiet. Suspiciously quiet. No messages, no phone calls, no sudden appearances in places I usually went. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe Daniel had finally accepted reality. Maybe Lauren had talked sense into him. Maybe he had actually taken that flight to Olivia's city. Life slipped back into a steady rhythm. Work, gym, evenings at home. Simple, predictable, peaceful. Then Marco invited me to board game night. A small group of our friends gathered at his apartment every couple of weeks. Nothing wild, just pizza, cards, and occasional shouting over Monopoly. I arrived with a bottle of wine and a bag of chips. Marco opened the door with his usual grin. Rachel, you made it! Wouldn't miss it. Inside, the living room was already lively. Music playing softly. Cards on the table. People laughing. Something in my chest loosened. This was what normal looked like. For about 12 minutes. Then the doorbell rang. Marco walked over casually and opened it, and immediately froze. I couldn't see the doorway from where I sat, but I heard the voice. Daniel. Hey, he said brightly. My stomach dropped. Marco stepped halfway outside and lowered his voice. You can't be here. Daniel laughed. What do you mean? I told you Rachel was coming tonight. Oh. A pause. Then Daniel said, far too loudly. I didn't realize she'd be here. Several people in the room turned to look at me. Marco rubbed his face. You literally texted me asking if she was coming, he said quietly. Daniel shrugged and stepped inside anyway. Well, he said casually. Small world. My jaw tightened. Daniel walked into the room like he belonged there. Like nothing had happened. Hey, Rachel, he said. I didn't respond. Marco looked like he wanted to physically drag him out, but Daniel had already taken a seat at the table. Game night, he said cheerfully. The room fell silent. Then someone awkwardly shuffled the cards. The game started, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Daniel kept glancing at me, trying to catch my eye, trying to provoke a reaction. I gave him none. After 15 minutes, he finally spoke. You know, he said casually to the table, Rachel and I had the funniest misunderstanding a couple weeks ago. Marco slammed his hand on the table. No. Daniel blinked. What? We are not doing that here, Marco said firmly. Daniel raised his hands. I was just explaining. You were texting people that she threw you out, Marco said, after you broke up with her. The room went quiet. Daniel's smile twitched. That's not exactly how it happened. Oh, really? Marco said. Daniel leaned back in his chair. Well, I said something jokingly and she overreacted. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. I'm leaving. Marco immediately shook his head. No, you're not. He is. Daniel rolled his eyes. Rachel, you're still being dramatic. That was the first time I looked directly at him all night. Daniel, I said calmly, you texted me saying we should break up. Yes, but... I agreed. Yes, but... And now you're showing up at my gym, my apartment, and apparently my social life. The room went completely silent. Daniel's expression hardened. That's not fair. Marco pointed at the door. Out! Daniel didn't move. Marco stood up. Now! The tension snapped. Daniel grabbed his jacket and pushed his chair back. This is ridiculous, he muttered. Then he walked towards the door. Halfway out, he turned around. You know, he said to the room, there are always two sides to a story. Marco crossed his arms. Yeah, he said. And yours changes every time you tell it. Daniel left. The door slammed. The problem was, that wasn't the last time he appeared. Not even close. Over the next week, Daniel began showing up everywhere. Pub quiz night. Oh, wow, he said loudly when he walked in. Rachel's here too? Beach volleyball. The universe keeps bringing us together, he joked. Marco's birthday dinner. I thought everyone was invited. At first, people gave him the benefit of the doubt. Coincidences happen. But after the fourth or fifth time, the pattern became obvious. Daniel wasn't running into me. He was tracking me. Marco confirmed it one evening. He's been asking people where you'll be, he told me. Then showing up. I rubbed my temples. Fantastic. Marco shook his head. It gets worse. What? He tells a different story every time. I looked up. Different how? Marco leaned back in his chair. One version is that you overreacted to a joke. Another is that you kicked him out without letting him explain. And the latest one? I raised an eyebrow. You planned the breakup because you're secretly seeing someone else. I laughed despite myself. The only other relationship in my life right now is my PlayStation. Marco grinned. Honestly, that sounds healthier. But Daniel wasn't done escalating. A few days later, my office security called me downstairs. When I reached the lobby, the guard pointed toward the parking lot. Is that someone you know? I followed his finger. Across the street, sitting inside a parked car, was Daniel. He wasn't even hiding, just watching the building, waiting. Something cold settled in my stomach. The guard looked concerned. He's been there about 40 minutes. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I said quietly. I know him. And that was when I realized something important. Daniel wasn't just refusing to move on. He was spiraling. And people who spiral don't always stop on their own. That afternoon, HR suggested something I hadn't considered. A restraining order. At the time, it felt extreme. After all, Daniel was just being dramatic. Right? I would learn very quickly that I was wrong. Because the next day, he showed up again. But this time, he brought a sign. The morning started normally. Too normally. I arrived at the office just before 9, coffee in one hand, laptop bag over my shoulder. My phone rang while I was still settling at my desk. Building security. Rachel, the guard said carefully, you might want to come downstairs. My stomach tightened. Is he back? A pause. Yes. When I reached the lobby, the guard nodded toward the glass entrance. Across the street. I stepped closer to the windows, and there he was. Daniel, standing on the sidewalk holding a large piece of poster board. The message written in thick black marker read, "Let's talk." For a moment, I just stared. Daniel spotted me through the glass and lifted the sign higher, smiling like he was starring in a romantic movie. The guard looked at me. You want us to call the police? I hesitated, then sighed. Not yet. I stepped outside. The autumn air was cool and sharp. Daniel brightened immediately when he saw me. Rachel! He lowered the sign and took a step forward. I raised a hand. Stop! He froze. We need to talk, he said. We've talked. No, we haven't, he insisted. You've just been avoiding me. I folded my arms. You texted me ending the relationship. You knew I didn't mean it. Daniel, my voice stayed calm. You said we should break up. Yes, but it was a test. That's the problem. His expression tightened. You're still hung up on that? You tried to manipulate me. I was seeing if you cared. I cared, I said. For 2 years. The words hit harder than I expected. Daniel looked shaken for a moment. Then the frustration returned. You're blowing this out of proportion. I glanced at the sign. You're standing outside my office with a poster. It's romantic. It's harassment. The words seemed to physically hit him. You'd call the police on me? If I have to. Cars passed behind him. Pedestrians walked by, pretending not to watch. Finally, Daniel lowered the sign. You're really doing this, he said quietly. Yes. He studied my face, like he was searching for the version of me who used to apologize first. The version who used to fix everything. But that version was gone. After a moment, he turned and walked back to his car. I watched him drive away. Then I went back inside. That afternoon, HR called me into a meeting. They didn't waste time. We recommend filing for a restraining order. The security supervisor nodded. He's escalating. They were right. The next morning confirmed it, because Daniel came back, this time with a different sign. When the guard called me downstairs again, I already knew what I would see. The sign read, "You can't ignore love." I stared through the glass doors. Daniel stood across the street like a protester. People walking by were openly staring now. My coworkers had gathered behind me. The guard spoke quietly. "We're calling the police." I nodded. Yes. 2 officers arrived about 15 minutes later. Daniel was still standing there when they approached. From inside the lobby, I watched the conversation. At first, he looked defensive, then confused, then irritated. Finally, one of the officers gestured toward the building. Toward me. Daniel looked over. Our eyes met through the glass. Something shifted in his expression. Not anger, not sadness, just disbelief, like he still couldn't understand how things had gotten this far out of his control. The officer handed him a formal warning. Daniel said something I couldn't hear. Then he got into his car and drove away. That afternoon, I filed the paperwork. Restraining order request. I thought that would finally end it, but Daniel had one more move left. 3 nights later, someone knocked on my door. I opened it expecting a delivery driver. Instead, a tall man I had never seen before stood on the porch. He looked uncomfortable. "Rachel?" he asked. "Yes, I'm Blake." I waited. "Daniel said you might know me." "I absolutely do not." Blake shifted awkwardly. "He said you were harassing him." I stared at him for a moment, then stepped aside. "Come in." He hesitated. "You sure?" "Yes." He stepped inside and looked around the living room. "Daniel told me you threw him out for no reason," he said carefully. I walked to the kitchen counter and picked up a folder. "Did he mention the restraining order?" Blake blinked. "The what?" I handed him the paperwork, then showed him screenshots of Daniel's messages. Then the camera footage of Daniel throwing the box at my door. Blake read silently. His expression slowly changed from confusion to realization. "Oh," he said. A long pause. "Wow." I leaned against the counter. "Yeah." Blake handed the papers back. "Rachel, I'm really sorry." "For what?" "For showing up like this." "You didn't know?" He shook his head. "He told me you were stalking him." I laughed softly. "That's impressive." Blake rubbed the back of his neck. "I'm leaving." "Good plan." He walked toward the door, then paused. "You seem very calm about all this." I shrugged. "I work in finance. We deal with bad decisions every day." He laughed quietly. Then he left. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. "Daniel." I didn't answer. But the voicemail he left was unforgettable. Apparently, I had just ruined yet another story he had been telling people about me. The restraining order hearing was scheduled the following week. And by the time the judge saw the evidence, Daniel's little test was finally about to receive its final grade. The hearing took less than 20 minutes. The judge reviewed everything. Messages, screenshots, camera footage, police reports, gym incident statements, office security reports. Daniel's lawyer tried to frame it as a misunderstanding, a relationship dispute. Both parties emotional. The judge looked unimpressed. He turned to Daniel. "You initiated the breakup?" Daniel nodded reluctantly. "Yes, but..." The judge raised a hand. "And after she accepted that decision, you repeatedly contacted her." Daniel shifted. "I just wanted to talk." "You impersonated a medical office?" Daniel's lawyer opened his mouth. The judge raised an eyebrow. The lawyer closed it again. "You appeared at her gym," the judge continued. "Outside her workplace. And outside her residence." Daniel stared at the table. Finally, the judge leaned back. "Mr. Brooks," he said calmly, "you terminated the relationship." Daniel said nothing. "What followed is not reconciliation," the judge continued. "It is harassment." Daniel looked up suddenly. "It was a misunderstanding," he insisted. "I was testing her." The judge studied him for several seconds. "That's manipulation," he said. "Not communication. Restraining order granted. Daniel must remain 500 feet away from me, my home, and my workplace." 6 months later, life looked completely different. Quieter. Healthier. My apartment finally looked the way I had always wanted it to. Minimal. Organized. Everything in it belonged to me. The decorative pillows Daniel loved so much were long gone. Sleep had never been better. Work was going well, too. I had recently been promoted to senior analyst. More responsibility, more stability, and significantly less chaos. One evening after work, I stopped at the supermarket near my apartment. I was comparing 2 brands of barbecue sauce when I heard a familiar voice behind me. "Rachel?" I turned. Daniel's mother stood there holding a basket. For a moment, we just looked at each other. Then she gave a small, awkward smile. "Hello?" "Hi," I said politely. The silence stretched. Finally, she sighed. "I'm sorry about everything that happened." I nodded slightly. "I appreciate that." She hesitated. "Daniel is working on himself." I didn't ask what that meant. Instead, I placed the barbecue sauce in my basket. "I hope things improve for him," I said. She looked relieved. "He knows he messed up." I thought about that for a moment, then nodded. "He had something good." I considered the words, then said quietly, had. Past tense. She understood. We exchanged polite goodbyes and walked in opposite directions. That night, I stood on my balcony with a glass of iced tea and looked out at the quiet city lights. 6 months earlier, I would have been inside arguing about something ridiculous. Now the apartment was silent, peaceful. Daniel had tried to test my love. What he never expected was that I would simply accept the breakup and walk away. The truth about tests like that is simple. When someone threatens to leave in order to manipulate you, the relationship is already over. All that remains is deciding who walks away first. As for Daniel, the last rumor I heard was that he had started dating someone new. Apparently, they both enjoy relationship tests. They break up every other week, then reconcile, then test each other again. Honestly, they sound perfect for each other. Meanwhile, the only tests in my life these days are much simpler. New smoker recipes, and whether I can beat my personal deadlift record. So far, both are going very well.